This is an extract of a translation of an interview made in 2002 in Dutch from Bocksaga for William the Writer regarding the military system of Paradis-et according to Ior Bock and his Bocksaga. Ior Bock, as a boy of 7, he had to come to the saloon where his mother and sister were sitting. He only had to listen to what these two were telling each other. 2 hours long. The next day they started to ask him questions first to check if he heard it all well enough. After that he sat listening again for 2 hours, breathless. From that day on the story did not stop anymore. Every day 2 hours long, and if by accident one day would skip he would get 4 hours the next day. 20 years he has been listening like this. It is not just a story, but an age-old saga about humanity that, long before ice would develop on this planet, were all family of each other. All inhabitants of the whole planet family of each other? Picture, Ior is the last born of the Bock family, whom for centuries kept the world history in shape, narrating. A big part of my life I traveled around the world without a steady place to stay. I spent a lot of winters in Goa. There I met a man from Finland, whom I soon became friends with. His name was Ior. Normally he would spend the summers in Finland, where he was a sort of guide that showed tourists the 7 islands before the coast of Helsinki. Islands on which he highlighted the history of the 18th century. An era he knew a lot about to tell. In winter times he would mostly be in Goa, where we met each other regularly. I believe we knew each other 9 years already when he told me sometime in 1984 that his mother just died and she gave him permission to make a secret story known to public, that for centuries long was narrated from generation to generation in his family. Because he was the last born and the story should not become lost, he wanted to tell me the story. You understand, I was kind of surprised, but I was interested as well. That sounds like a fairy tale. This word literally means that what has been spoken, while saga means literally that what has been said. Gesagt. What he heard has been narrated all these centuries, because it was life-threatening to talk about this with outsiders. The saga tells exactly how an ancient worldwide culture functioned for millions of years without religion and without conflicts. His mother and sister used here for the oldest language in the world, the root language. This language is still spoken on the islands close to the south coast of Finland. According to the saga, this language was the basis of all the languages spoken afterwards. It exists from 29 sounds in which the whole history of humanity lies hidden. Every sound has a meaning, and once you know this meaning, you are able to analyze every word spoken in any language around the world, and you are able to know the true history of our planet culture, because from this root language all the other languages come. On the 24th of July in the year 1050, there came an end to the last remnants of this culture when Pope Leo IX from South and Middle Europe organized a crusade to exterminate the age-old world center called Hel, the last part of Europe to be forcefully converted to Christianity. Sweden was converted in 1008 and Russia already in 987. Only Finland was still pagan and was slaughtered in huge masses. His Christian mechanist army existed from total barbarians, and the bloodbath was terrible. They were told to kill all the inhabitants, especially because an ancient information system about the pagan, hidden culture should be exterminated. Only a few families knew to escape to Lapland. One of them was the Bock family. The age-old information system which was hidden in the root language was being kept in shape. Until 1248 they were hidden there until the Swedish king Birger Jarl gave them permission to return to South Finland, as long as they would keep quiet about the old saga. Ior is the last born of the Bock family. Now for the first time his mother allowed him to tell the saga to outsiders. You understand that this all sounded so overwhelming, that it was difficult for me to believe this. Was this Ior Bock some kind of LSD hippie that came up with bizarre phantoms? When he started to tell me more and more, I became so fascinated that I could not stop listening. My whole world vision started to change, and the story was so beautifully right and was so detailed that I did not know to look anymore. Can this story all form his head? Is a narrated story to be trusted? It is of course known that together with Christianity, reading and writing was introduced in Finland. Before this there was only oral culture, and there were certain signs which were signs for oral stories. I always had the idea that narrated stories were totally unreliable. Everybody makes up something with the story. At least, that is what authors try to tell you. Research has proven though that even the youngest children do not tolerate the slightest change in a story if they hear it for the second time. Recently discovered clay plates dated long before our historical dating contained stories which were thousands of years narrated in Eastern Europe, without the slightest change. They are being told by analphabets literally as on these clay plates. The church monopolized reading and writing by death penalty so that they could use it exclusively as information system. The Pope dictated, the monks copied, and the writers' knights transported the texts to all the churches of Europe, where they were translated to the caste which had the right to come in the church. The common people were only allowed to enter the churches around the Middle Ages. Mostly these were political decrees, because the priests and bishops had worldly power and were feared landlords with big armies and daily used spires. The ceremony was a sort of newsreel or newspaper. Reading and writing, a salient and static information system, is now contemporary and the cause of our linear way of thinking. To write text we use sentences. Every sentence, also this one you are reading, has a beginning and an end. Talking works differently. Sounds come from your mouth. The sounds cause vibrations. The brain vibrates along. The sound alphabet of the root language does not know a beginning or an end, it runs in a circle. The last sound connects, binds with the first one, which causes a more natural, spontaneous, simultaneous, and not linear way of thinking. Just like you throw pebbles in a pond, the thought circles become bigger and come together again. This way simultaneous, spontaneous thought processes appear. Processes which are being discovered lately more and more, in quantum physics, genetics, astrophysics, etc. Basically the way nature seems to work. This natural way of thinking we cannot imagine anymore nowadays. But let's not become too theoretical. I will tell you something of the saga, so you become acquainted with some words of the root language. We start with the creation. The planet brought forth first algae. Algae which produced alales, from which grew the frogs came, which climbed on land and developed into monkeys or apes. One of these apes fucked a nanny voe or nanny goat. They got twins, a boy and a girl, the first two humans Freya and Freya. On his 7th year Freya developed sperm in his balls, while at the same time the complete sound system, ALPHERNASBETN, grew. The sounds in which the complete system of this planet and also whole Bocksaga based upon, are organically grown, and Freya brought it over to his sister, speaking the root language with her spontaneously. Freya was the first one and Freya the first Bock. From them the human race, Azur, came. This first Azur family lived in the country land Udenma, meaning something like the Sunland, Ringland, Eternal Land, or Motherland, which had a diameter of 250 kilometers and was located exactly at the North Pole when there was no ice on Earth yet. The center of that country was called Hell. The Earth axis was standing straight on the Sun, so that the Sun was rotating 24 hours per day, turning in a circle past the horizon. It was never dark in Odenma. On the equator it was exactly 12 hours day and 12 hours night. There were no seasons. They appeared when the Earth axis moved 50,010,015 years ago. I see you looking in disbelief. In Finland they also started to point to their forehead. According to the official history book, South Finland was before the year 1250 an empty, uninhabitable wild land. The first inhabitants were from Ural. Finnish children are convinced they do not come from their country. Everybody knows that 1,000 years ago nobody was living here. Final. When Ior Bock in 1984 announced that the bloodthirsty Roman troops made it a wild land in 1050 and that the original inhabitants could only return in 1248, there sounded wild laughter, especially when he told that the inhabitants had lived there for more than 9,000 years. Complete insane fantasy. Crazy. A year later they found an age-old fishing net in Finland and everybody was astonished to hear that with the carbon dating test this net was 9,000 years old. What a coincidence? Now they printed new history books. But it became even funnier better. A few years ago a Finnish truck driver, who was also an amateur archaeologist, discovered an interesting cave, known as Wolf's Cave, in which he started to dig. Soon he discovered age-old utensils which he brought to the museum because you are obliged to when you find prehistoric axe or other tools. Through carbon dating these were from before the Neanderthals. And that could not be, of course. Also this was an amateur who probably wanted to make an impression and so they did not take it too serious. He took this as a free card to dig further and yes, he found much more. Every year he came to bring new stuff, which were put, sighing, on a big pile. These amateurs with their stories. Last year there was finally someone of the museum that became interested and came looking for the cave. When the story proved true, they placed a huge fence before the cave and nobody else was allowed inside, except for the international scientists, because this could not be true. The newspapers were full and it was raining protests from Finnish people who thought it ridiculous that the government could place a fence around age-old ruminants of the own people. The official scientists came from Norway, Italy, etc. That whole summer they were busy and guess what? The tools are dated back before the ice time, so are more than 70,000 years old. Far from for the Neanderthal who is seen as some sort of half-monkey. The newspapers in Scandinavia could talk about nothing else. There are few journalists now in Finland who carefully take the Bocksaga, where they had so much fun about it before, more serious. Ior Bock told in 1984 already that there was a civilization before the ice time. Now they have scientific proof, which they cannot deny anymore. But this is just the beginning, because the funny thing is that this age-old society, what the Bocksaga is about, functioned in a complete different way than ours, but that all the customs are still found in our language. Take for example the word infantry. We think immediately, army unit. But the word comes from root language and there the word infant or child and eyrie, the planting of an oak tree. The oak tree was the symbol of that human, so infantry means literally the organization for the making of children. That is something else than the killing of children. Lancier is also a military term that means nowadays, knight with lance, as the famous Lancelot, an English hero who used his lance a lot. In root lancier means, he that makes children with his lance, penis. Take the word, militaire. In root, eater of meal, militaire. Every man used every morning his arm to let his eye spit. The letter I means in root, penis. The dot on the I is the sperm. He thus used his arm to masturbate and next to eat his sperm. Every man in the ancient times started the day with the eating of this meal, meal-eater and militaire or militaire. In the infantry though, the militaire sacrificed this meal to the lancier, whom got sperm from the whole regime, with which he made of the car woman a child. This woman also had the mala, the juice which a healthy woman produces when she comes, of all the women in the regime inside her. In the heathen, pagan time, heading or, from the head, every woman and every man started the day with an orgasm, after which the man swallowed his sperm and the woman swallowed her mala. Before the making of a child, they used this militaire system, in which they used their weapons to create. The making of children went completely different than nowadays, was a completely different procedure. You hear now that more and more marriages fall apart. It seems family life is disappearing. Nowadays it is mother and child. Dad is far away, out of sight. Men use their weapons to destroy. If somebody aims his bow and arrow on you, you get shocked. If the arrow goes through you, you are dead. But Cupido had a bow and arrow, with which he did not kill, but he made children. Every weapon always has two opposing associations. Look at the English with their pistol root. Tool to piss. If the Englishman is enough, he can shoot his load. He uses his artillery. In root language, art or human species, the letter I stands for penis. Le means smile, le you pronounce as in the French, soleil sun. Only if you say lay your mouth smiles, so means mouth in root. So soleil means literally smiling mouth. Ri means repeatment. Artillery is thus the human being that comes smiling every day and gives his load to the infantry. All weapons have this erotic meaning. When I say that he has a cannon in his trousers, everybody knows what I mean. Still we always choose the destructive side. That is for real, the rest is sign language. In the pagan times they needed an army of at least 11,111 men, though, whom gave their sperm to the Landseer to make one child. But also 11,111 women had donated their juices to the future mother. In total 22,224 humans, including the man and the woman that in the end totally loaded fuck to make the child. It could be much more, because everybody could cooperate to the future child. Such a child has thus many parents. Everybody feels this way in a way responsible for a child because they partake physically in his or her parent being. You understand that I became dizzy when I first heard this. It sounded unbelievable. Ior told me that every child from its 7th year on learned to take its genitals in the mouth. You have to be quite so supple for this. If you learn this from your 7th year though, it is difficult to get rid of course. Every morning every woman and man would suck her himself. What a way to start your day. Not a drip of this treasure's moist would get lost. The military system to make children works as follows. Every regime, I am not going to explain every word now, otherwise we won't hurry get stuck. But you can count on that in root. It all has to do with the making of children, existed of 1,000 men, parted in divisions of 10. The lowest range existed from 10 rondeliers. They were wearing a red pointy hat and had a white cord with on one side a sort of little noose, on the other side a knot. The rope fitted exactly in between two stretched arms. They collected sperm from this seed carriers. Yes, civilization means seed carriers. If the time to make children came again, you could visit such a rondelier. Instead of taking your own penis in your mouth, you put it in his mouth and you offered your sperm. Not everybody was destined to make children though. The rondelier would look first at what kind of penis you had, if you had a lens or a club. A lens has a thick base and the head is thin. You see this best when you do not have an erection. If you do have an erection, you can have a sword or a sable, straight or crooked. If you have a club, it can be big or small. A big one is called slag, that is where our word sledgehammer is derived from. You need 2 hands to hold it. Men with a lens do not have the right to offer in this fertilizing system. Only the clubs belong to this club. The lances make the children in the end. If the rondelier was sucking a club donor and received his sperm, he would get the cord and would make a knot. The distance between 2 knots would show the length of the penis. If he sucked 10, he would go to the rondelier to give him his semen. The rondelier would receive the semen of 11 men at once. After that he would get the cord, untie the knot, braid a yellow thread inside. After that the rondelier could start again. If you have collected the sperm of 10 men, then your sperm have turned quite so yellow. Just try it out if you do not believe me. The yellowier the cord, the more sperm he would have gotten. The rondelier would get 11 men per shot inside. If he had 10x11 inside, he would go to the captain, the head in which 10 rondeliers load their semen. Every captain gets thus the seed of 11 10 men. With this he goes to the helibardier or oversten. Oversten, over 10, would get all the yellow sperm of 10 captains. You see, this has nothing to do with war anymore. We live with the vision that war is part of the history of mankind. With the Bocksaga we see that war is something from the last few thousand years, but that there is a huge era before that in which all these words and expressions are being associated with something else. Old stories from famous cultures, in which weapons and soldiers took part, are mostly symbolic and are wrongly, because always violently explained presently. Soldier means solidaire, drinker of the soul, sperm. Anyway, let's go back to the Oversten. He has the jackpot now and gives it to the Lancier. Who is going to make the child with the woman, who is also on top of the army of women who all offered their mala? Their titles you still see nowadays in the Salvation Army, Mahalur. Maya is the first daughter. Freja and Freya had 12 sons and 7 daughters. The first son has the title, Ra, and the first daughter, Maya. They became the king and Kana of whole mankind. There are a lot of words that start with Maya's name. Magister, Meister, Magic, Majesty, etc. But we are off track again. The woman and the man whom both have the mala and sperm of 22.224 humans inside them are now with each other. For 30 days the woman drinks the jackpot of the man. Every morning she sucks him. This period is called Hanai Moon Hanshi, I penis, moon mouth month. She has the right to take his penis inside her mouth during this month. The deep yellow sperm is going through her whole body and gives information to the egg which will be fertilized after this month in one session. Nowadays it is the other way around. The child is being made during the wedding night and after that the couple is going on a honeymoon. The result is 6 billion people on this world. In the times where there existed not one religion, it was all about the quality of the child. All the men decided which man was the right one to mate and all the women ate the same. As we saw, there were many demands for this. With the man it was about if your sword was straight or crooked, etc., etc. Just as farmers made the best couples to get top quality. This we think a very normal thing. We are saving the whale, the elephant, the bear, the panda, but who is saving the human? In our country, Holland, we knew the same system until the Christians took over. Of course they could not forbid the existing system, so everything was Christianized. The country was parted into parochies with in its center the church instead of the kapelle, power place. 12 men and 12 women were then in charge of which woman of which family should marry who. The families did not have any opinion in this. That started only in 1534, in Sweden, and when Henry VIII threw the Pope out in 1534, after which we had Luther and friends. From that moment on the grandparents decided whom of the children was having enough capacities to keep the family intact. That was when corruption came in. All of a sudden wealth, status, and position, land were more important than physical quality, which was the custom with the independent. The parents had no choice, either would yourself even less. The grandparents decided if you would get married or not. Only in the beginning of 1900 your parents could decide with whom you would get married. The children themselves could only choose in America, to where a lot of immigrants would go who never knew that right. You just left your parents and grandparents behind in Europe. If you choose yourself nowadays, you trust your feelings mostly, being in love, attraction, etc. Feelings that decide upon the rest of your life. That was when the age of love started. The highest proven feeling, all the top hits, films and soaps are all about, the highest feeling which was absolute base of the ancient procreation system, but not the only base. Children are meant to be born strong, beautiful and healthy, beloved by all their thousands of parents. We confuse love mostly with being in love, and this does not work at all. Being in love comes as often as it goes. The Chinese even call it a disease. It is ridiculous to build your whole life on this temporary high. In present America there are as many divorces as there are marriages. But let us go back to Paradis-et, which existed for 400.000.000 years. Exactly on the North Pole the ringland Odenma was located, with the middle HEL. That was where Bock lived, whom, together with Swan, made at least 12 sons and 7 daughters. The Paradis-et, family. The 12th son was called Ior Bock, and he had to listen to the saga from his 7th year until he was 27. At that age he would get the Bock function of his father, and he would mate with a swan of his age, the most beautiful and healthiest woman on earth. She would also get at least 12 sons and 7 daughters, the first who would be called Ra and Maya again, and they would become king and Kvenna. The other daughters would often become Diesel, tribe mother, and they would be fertilized by Bock. So next to the Paradis-et family, the Bocksaga family would start to exist in the country where the sun always shines. The old Bock and Swan would be called Per and Ella now. Everybody in Odenma was now per son or per daughter. The ringland Odenma was surrounded by many countries of the same size. They covered the rest of the planet and were inhabited by Vaner. They spoke Vund language, which was based on the sound system of the root language of the Bock family. The Vund language had far more opportunities and was perfectly for the totally different circumstances found on the planet. The Vund language is called Finnish now and was spoken all over the world. You would find sperma offerings in all these countries up to Bock in Odenma. By the time it reached him it looked like liquid gold. The sperma of Bock would be given to all the countries of the world, the same counts for Mala. But the root information system would be passed on. NARS and SINAR traveled all over the world and performed a sort of theater shows called circus. Everybody in these days would choose his/her own day of death. On the day you could not walk anymore with your own walking stick, you would say goodbye to everybody around you. Everybody was your family. You would divide your earthly belongings, and you went to its stupa, a steep cliffside. At family, stupa falling. 2 strong men would cross their arms and carry you upstairs. There you should be able to stand with your stick. Exactly at 12 noon you would point your stick at the Sunday. Without your stick you would lose your balance and you would fall. Most of the times you would die this way. If not, the Ate Club would come and would give a good hit to end it. You would be burned and the ash would be spread under the oak tree. Your soul in the ash would be sucked up by the roots of the oak, transported to the leaves, and the sun would vaporize you from these leaves and transport you into the atmosphere, in which you would be transported centrifuge power like from it to the North Pole, to Valhalla in hell. That place where earth and sun energy would meet is the only place on earth where Bock and Swan whom breathe this energy and make their children. The English breathing and breeding look a lot like each other. Maybe the Dutch word broeden, breed, is derived from there. When an old person was about to die, he went to a temple, which is located in the thickest layer of granite of our planet. A natural hallway of almost 25 kilometers ran under the earth, to an enormous round space under Valhalla, the exact North Pole, which would become wider when you would go deeper. A sort of turned around ice cone. Along the walls of this enormous space a spiral-formed road was made, which would lead to the innumerable Apaches, in which golden presents from all the ringlands would be stashed. These Lemminkainen temple has special spaces for every generation of Bock. In front of the entrance, there is a golden statue of Bock when he is 27. The statue looks into the depths as if it could fall down every moment. The Ate Stupa of Bock. Behind the statue there is a hall surrounded by 3 rooms full of the most beautiful golden objects received from the different ring lands out of appreciation for the worldwide fertilization system, which could be shown in the hall. If Bock would pass down his title to his 27-year-old son, all these objects would be brought there. Thus, if he wants to end his life, he will stand in front of the statue and he jumps into the depths. The ash of the Paradis-et family is being buried underneath the aspen. The roots of this tree sucks the soul, and via the leaves a long trip starts again. You should not forget that it was the same temperature on the whole world. There were no seasons, but there was a race without any nameable differences. This changed drastically when 50.010.015 years ago on the 24th of July the Earth axis made a complete polar shift. A disaster so huge that it changed in one instant almost the life on Earth. The Earth became for a huge part one big ice block. A period that lasted 50.000.000 years and is being called Atlantis, all the land ice, a word we still know as Atlantis. Every state nowadays ending on the word land or underwater then, except for Thailand, but it was called Siam in the past. All of a sudden Odin which lay close to a warm Gulf Stream, running completely different back then, thus inhabitable, abandoned of the other ring lands by never-ending ice landscapes, so the central information system could not function anymore. During Atlantis Odin was not the central reference point anymore. In the other countries thus developed all kinds of variations on the old system. The Earth now knew different climates and seasons, so the humans changed immensely. In the 50 million years that the Atlantis period lasted, the inhabitants of Odin developed a whiter skin color, blonder hair and blue or green eyes. The military procreation system became impossible, too. In the warm countries 10 different sorts are developed. These countries got kings whom install variations on this fertilizing system. Also every country started to develop different variations on the language. The second disaster took place 10.015 years ago. The ice was moving backwards slowly to the north for thousands of years, and the inhabitants foresaw huge disasters when the ice border would come close to their quarters. 1,000 years they lived in limestone caves on Gotland in the Baltic. 9,015 years ago they returned back and they recovered the original system, complete with Bock and Swan, whom would get 7 daughters and 12 sons etc. But 2 of these sons, Dan and Sven, did not see anything in this ancient system and left to other parts to start their own systems. Denmark, the country land of Dan, and Svenskara, the country land of Sven, nowadays Denmark and Sweden. The group around Sven extended his system to Norway. From Hel were sent messengers to also let the other ringlands become acquainted with the ancient information system. For 50 million years they were out of touch with each other. This worked for about 5.000 years. All of a sudden white, blonde and blue-eyed northerners were now facing brown, yellow, red and black family members. After Dan and Sven, Rasul and Sultan, the rulers of the Mediterranean, also stepped out of the fertilizing system. Later this was followed by India, Narkasul, Africa, Suleiman and China, Peking. This leads us to the well-known history. Rulers would call themselves high spiritual beings. Everybody should obey. A concept completely unknown in the original information system. It was a completely unknown in the original information system. It was a complete natural system which would work according to the laws every animal, plant or element had to deal with. The 4 creating female and the 4 male creating powers. It had nothing to do with religion, but with the way every cell of our body wishes to work. Every dysfunction you feel immediately and a natural human feels this right away, automatically. During the last 5.000 years of our history, an information system developed based on personal ambition, greed and power over others. New thought systems were violently pushed upon us. Linear thinking developed itself. Now people had to believe something every cell protested against, otherwise you would get the death penance. Thus the contact with our perfect body got broken down more and more, thinking took over. The most bloodthirsty terrorist groups were the religions. Just before in 1050 the ancient center of the world Hel was exterminated by them, the Bock family decided to close the entrance to the temple, so it would be impossible to find. This happened in 987. This temple is still located at the ancient property of the Bock family. Ior Bock states he is the last born from this ancient family. The only one who has got the history of the world still in his head memory. But, like the negative of a hologram, this can be enough to bring this whole culture back to life. When he started to tell me more and more, I noticed I would start talking about it with others. Interest was increasing and Ior would be invited more and more to come and tell his story. Still the doubt would be huge. Are some flipped-out freaks fooling us here? But more and more dedicated fans would come, who were drinking their own sperm or melon each morning. I do this myself for years now. This you can never tell others, otherwise they would not believe you at all. In hidden, from the head times, now pagan heathen times, there was no difference between male and female sexuality. Everybody had to deal with each other sexually, just Homo sapiens. Nowadays we talk obstinately about gays, lesbian women and heterosexuals, etc. Because the Bock family had the right to open the temple in 1,000 years, we started to dig in 1987 to make all doubts disappear that way. By this humankind will be confronted with their original, natural way of procreation. The hill on which the temple is located is situated on the property land of Ior Bock. Of course it costs a fortune to look if his story is for real and if there is really a temple. In Finland the interest in the Bocksaga was growing also, and soon volunteers would dig and they discovered an entrance in this hill. Huge excitement of course. But now many years later only 30 meters of hallway has been dug up and not even from wall to wall. But this year there was a big breakthrough. All of a sudden a blank check came from a few scientists that wish to stay anonymous, but who find it of big importance to dig out this temple. There is money enough and soon the work will start. Via Aloha I will keep in touch with you, and if you cannot wait, settle behind your computer now and go to willemderitter.com on the internet and look in the radio guide of Ritter Radio, because every week you can talk live to me about all the details of this immense story and the progress of the diggings from HEL.